Welcome everybody. Let's give everybody a minute or two before we kick off. Got a pretty good crowd tonight. Proud of you guys in Cranford. So give us a minute or two because you're in good company. We got standing room only tonight, so bear with me for just a minute. And I promise one no later than two after we will dig into the task at hand. Hopefully, let me make sure this chat. Okay, if someone could just let me know if I'm sharing my screen, that would be appreciated. Pop that in the chat if you will. And by and large tonight, hi Lisa. Looks like you found the link. By and large, for the most part, I'm going to ask that you guys live in Q&A tonight. I want to make this thing as interactive as possible. That's how I think it's the best presentation, and I have a pretty good idea about what to talk about, but I want to make sure that I'm focusing on what's top of mind for you all, make sure I'm hitting on the questions that are kind of most prevalent in your household. So I'm going to encourage this thing to be as interactive as I can. I'll apologize ahead of time. You're stuck with one voice tonight, unfortunately. So usually we try to have at least a wingwoman, so we can, number one, you get a little breakup from one voice, and also one of us can man the chat while the other one talks. So I'm still confident though. I think I can get the job done tonight. So please, just from a housekeeping standpoint, put your questions in Q&A. That's for a few reasons. Number one, if you got to duck out early or you're kind of half in it tonight, this whole thing's being recorded. So everybody's going to get the recording tomorrow. Everybody's going to get the slide deck. But the really nice thing about to your point, right, both the recording and the slide deck will get sent to you, each of you tomorrow. And for your buddies that couldn't make it tonight, them especially, they'll get both the recording and they'll get the benefit from the Q&A, right? And you can also be anonymous in there. I'm sure you guys are probably a lot of your PhDs in Zoom by now, but you can be anonymous in there. So if you have a question that's more on the personal side or whatever it happens to be, pop it in there. I'll do everything that I can. We are, like I said, pretty full house tonight. So I can't promise I'm going to get to every question, but we're not going anywhere. This is all I do, all we do. So you will be able to ping us beyond tonight if you forgot to ask something or we didn't get back to a particular question. You know where to find us. So I think that's the housekeeping stuff for the most part. My name is Matt Carpenter. I'm representing College Aid Pro tonight. I've been doing this for coming up on 2 decades here. I think I've been at Cranford for, I don't know, 15 years or something like that. Maybe Lisa and I met when Lisa Burfight, your head school counselor, when she was at Livingston High School and then moved over to Cranford some time ago, and we've been coming to Cranford ever since, which we're super grateful for, and thanks as always for having us back. My goal tonight is basically, there's a few goals. I mean, number one, I want to start, we'll zoom out a little bit and give you a pretty good understanding of how this whole thing works, right? How does this financial aid and scholarship deal work? And then try to help you figure out, where do you fall on this spectrum? Are you going to be eligible for financial aid? How much? At which colleges? Can we expect our student to get any scholarships? How much? At which colleges? So if nothing else, I hope you leave here tonight with a pretty good understanding of, number one, how this thing works, and number two, where you all fit in this whole thing specifically, because as you're going to learn, everybody's different. There's very little one size fits all within this beast, which is part of the reason why it's confusing and why people sometimes get themselves in trouble. So we're going to try to hopefully shed some light on that. I think I'm a good resource. I've been doing this my entire career. It's the only language I know. largely based on personal experience. I'm the oldest of 3 kids. My parents didn't know what the hell they were doing. God love them. And I figured out that that was not unique, right? So I'm, as a result of that, we fell on our face a little bit, and that means specifically we overpaid for college, and I borrowed too much. My parents borrowed too much. There was both long-term repercussions from that. So that was kind of the genesis of, me getting involved in this world, figuring there's probably going to be a better way to do it. And that's, why I've been doing this for coming up on 18 years now. So, okay, I think without further ado, we can get in here. That's most of the housekeeping stuff. Those are not your presenters tonight. God bless them both. As you can see, a couple sweethearts, Peg and Dan, but you're stuck with Matt Carpenter tonight. I'm going to steal one of my colleagues' lines though before we dive in here. And again, like I said, I'm going to ask you to live in the Q&A tonight, but a couple times I'll ask you to go and chat. And what Peg always asks, and I think this is a great question because it kind of summarizes it, is what's keeping you up at night? What are the things as it pertains to this? Like, why are you tuned in tonight? Like, in this process, what are the things that are really like freaking you out? Because that's usually helpful for me and helps kind of frame where we focus tonight. Helps get my wheels turning, hopefully your wheels turning. But if you're open to it, and like I said, you can be anonymous, just pop in the chat, some of the things that are keeping you up at night around this process. And that's always a good place to start. And some of the usual suspects are coming in as I'm asking that question here. How are we going to pay for this? What if we didn't save anything? How does this whole thing work? The financial aid applications. What if we're not going to qualify for financial aid, but we don't think we can pay the full sticker price? So these are kind of if you're thinking these things, you're in good company, and these are the questions that are coming in, and these are the things that we're going to hit on tonight. So I can assure you that, that hopefully we can alleviate some of the stressors here, even if it's sometimes a harsh reality that comes with that too. So, okay. So, another question we get, and we got one just now, where do we start, right? Like, where do we even begin? You probably got an email from us earlier today, but we recommend set up an account, mycap.collegeaidpro.com, because that allows you to answer some of these first big questions. What are my EFCs, which we're going to talk about in a second here? Am I eligible for financial aid? What are colleges actually going to cost me? So if you haven't set up an account, I just popped it in the chat there. We recommend you do so. It's also, it doesn't cost anything, but it's also allows this thing to be interactive tonight. So as I'm coaching you up on how this whole thing works, you can kind of learn simultaneously, where your family specifically fits into this whole deal. Okay. And again, just another reminder, if you can, please pop the questions in Q&A. Okay. So high level, what is financial aid? In short, in its simplest terms, it's a discount from the sticker price, right? So if you're not paying the full sticker price, and the technical term for that is the cost of attendance at a particular college, that means that you're getting some type of financial aid. And there's a couple types of financial aid, and these are kind of the 3 biggies here. Our focus is going to be on the first 2 because that's free money, as opposed to the last type of financial aid, which is kind of creatively named self-help financial aid. Okay. Now, need-based grants is where we're going to spend the most time tonight, because I think this is probably the most complex, the most difficult to understand. So we're gonna spend some time talking about need-based financial aid. But anytime we see the word grants, right, and it's usually specifically need-based grants, that's a beautiful thing. That means free money. That's coming right off the top from the cost of attendance, from the sticker price. And this is money that's given from colleges that's primarily driven by your family's financial profile, right? And income and assets. We'll get into some specifics, but income and assets are the big drivers there. So it's based on your family's financial profile, and then how generous or not that particular college is when it comes to need-based financial aid, right? And again, guys, just one more reminder, please put the questions in the Q&A, and everybody's going to get the recording and the slide deck tonight, okay? Merit-based scholarships, in some ways, this is, I don't want to say the opposite, but it's on the other side of the coin of need-based financial aid, because this does not have anything to do with your family's financial situation. It has everything to do with the student's credentials and then what that particular college or colleges is looking for, right? So we don't care how much your parent or parents earn or have in resources, savings, whatever. We think you're a good fit for our school based on your profile as a student. We're going to give you a financial incentive to come here, right? Merit-based scholarships. We're going to spend some time talking about that tonight. And we'll also flag the fact that not every college has merit-based scholarships, right? Cranford and neighboring towns and up where I live in the Boston area, we're a bunch of education snobs, bunch of smart people around here, right? Bunch of very gifted kids. It doesn't matter how gifted you are at some colleges, scholarships don't exist, right? There's not one kid walking around Harvard that's there on a scholarship. So we're gonna talk about that a little bit tonight. Okay, and the last type of financial aid that we're gonna brush under the rug a little bit tonight is what's called self-help aid, right? Sexy term for loans, essentially. This is money that will essentially be included as part of our financial aid package, but in most cases, money we're gonna have to pay back. It doesn't make it a bad thing, but it's obviously not as desirable as the financial aid that comes via free money. So that's going to be our focus tonight, really, as it should be. Okay. Now, need-based financial aid, this is where we start, because like I said, in my experience, in my opinion, this is what gets a little bit complicated. It's a little bit more difficult, and there's more variations than merit-based financial aid, right? Than scholarships. So this is where I like to start. And then we'll kind of, we'll graduate to talking about merit-based scholarships. Now, something that I will very likely say more than once tonight is every college is different. Every family's situation is unique. Every student is unique, right? Everybody's different. There's not a lot of universal recommendations or kind of black and white rules that we can gravitate towards. It's all different. You know, my answer to most questions that I get on a daily basis is it depends on the college, right? And that's not I'm not being a politician. That's how it works. It depends on the college. It depends on the student, right? There's a lot of variation. So anytime we get a universal rule, we kind of want to lock into that and make sure we understand that, because that's helpful as we navigate the other confusing parts about this process. So when a college determines a student's eligibility for need-based financial aid, every college uses the same basic formula as a starting point to determine your eligibility for need-based financial aid. So, and that's what we're staring at right now. And that's why we want to get comfortable with this, because again, it kind of makes everything else a little bit easier when we get a bunch of different variations. So, and that rule is as follows, right? That is the cost of attendance minus your EFC, or expected family contribution. And if there's a difference between those two figures, that difference is your potential eligibility for need-based financial aid, right? That probably sounded like Latin, I would guess. So let's spend a minute to unpack that, okay? So cost of attendance, again, this is the sticker price. This is when you go look up like, hey, my kid's a smart student. They're interested in law and they love DC, Georgetown University. How much does it cost? $87,000. Cool. These are these scary sticker prices, right? The cost of attendance. That's kind of our starting point. Now, if you learn one thing tonight, or at least put this on the short list, for most families, the cost of attendance is downright misleading. In most cases, it's the third most important variable in determining how affordable or not affordable a college will be for your family, right? Again, for most families, cost of attendance are relevant, very counterintuitive, and we're going to figure out exactly why in the kind of coming minutes here, right? So that's our first one, cost of attendance. EFC, expected family contribution. This is a dollar amount that gets assigned to the student. There's a bunch of different variables that go into this. There's a bunch of different ways that colleges calculate this, but ultimately the income and the assets are the biggest drivers. And they're going to say, again, based on your family's financial profile, this is what we think you can pay annually for college. Okay. If that number, if that EFC is lower than the cost of attendance, the difference is your eligibility for need-based financial aid, right? So if we're talking about Georgetown, $87,000 sticker price. If your EFC is $50,000, they're going to say, well, you're eligible for $37,000 worth of need-based financial aid. So what happens, right? Who pays for that difference? Generally speaking, we always have to pay our EFC if it's lower than the cost of attendance. That's kind of our foundation. That's our starting point. Depending on the college, that's going to dictate how much more, if anything, we pay beyond our EFC. So I'm picking on Georgetown here because I'm saying they're $87,000 next year, which they're going to be. Okay. That's the bad news. The good news, they're very good with need-based financial aid. So if your EFC is 50, obviously that's still a very high number. That's what you pay. That other $37,000, that's going to come out of Georgetown's pocket, not yours. Okay. Again, not every college is Georgetown. They're generous with need-based financial aid. Not everybody is. So that's where the variation is gigantic from one school to the next. And we're going to look at some specific examples, I promise. But that's, again, from a high level, how this whole formula looks. Okay. So, where and how do we apply for a merit-based scholarship? We're going to spend some time on merit specifically. Generally speaking, when you apply to a college, you're automatically applying for their merit-based scholarships. So long as you satisfy their admissions deadlines, you're throwing your hat in the ring to be considered for their merit-based scholarships. Now, that's not a universal rule. So as you class of 2000, and as a matter of fact, if you wouldn't mind, pop in the chat. I'm breaking my own rule again, but just pop in the chat the class of your high school student right now, or oldest high school student. So I think it's primarily 23s, and that's what's coming through here. But, for the class 2023, you just need to satisfy, we got some overachievers here. We got some younger folks too, but when your student is a senior, for your overachieving parents that are getting educated early here, it's you just got to meet the deadlines when your student is a senior of applying to those colleges. And usually that's how you apply for merit-based scholarships. Now, there's exceptions. So you should contact each of the schools that you're applying to, ask the direct question, whether it's email, whether it's phone. Do you guys have any scholarships that we need to apply for outside of the standard typical admissions process in order to be considered for these merit-based scholarships, right? Because those schools do exist. Again, that's the exception rather than the rule, but there's enough of them that it's worth the homework. Okay. So if we understand that concept about the EFC, it matters, right? It is an important variable, specifically when it comes to need-based financial aid, and kind of our starting point in determining how much, if any, that we're going to be eligible for. Okay. So a few things to understand, because the big takeaway here is, to the extent that we can control, we'd like that thing to be as low as it can be, so we're eligible for more or some need-based financial aid. And almost and arguably more important than the strategies around your EFC is making sure that we avoid the missteps, making sure we avoid the mistakes that cost too many families tons of dough in this process because they made mistakes that are easy to make, right? And the first one, Exhibit A here, is what's considered an asset. And let's kind of focus on what's not considered an asset. When you all go to complete this FAFSA, which we'll talk about, but when you go to complete this financial aid application that every one of these colleges require, do not include your retirement accounts. Okay, let me say that 100 times in a row. Do not include your retirement accounts on the FAFSA. No 401ks, no 403bs, no 457s, no IRAs, no SEPs, no pension, anything that is qualified. Do not put it as an asset on the FAFSA. That is the biggest, most common mistake that too many families make that ends up costing them tons of money. Okay. So again, I cannot emphasize that point enough. And maybe if you remember one thing tonight, let it be that. Here's another point that I think is really important. Okay. Just about every college, the vast majority, put way more emphasis on any money in the student's name than they do the parent's name, right? So without getting too far into the weeds of the formula itself, from a high level, these colleges are saying, hey, if there's money in the kid's name and they're coming to this college, I want that money coming to us, right? So even if it's not a huge amount, you got 10 grand in your kid's name in the savings account, right? So let's say you got an industrious kid, their bar mitzvah money's there, their first communion money's there, whatever, right? You got 10 grand in that account. If you haven't done so already, add your name onto that account as a parent and include it as your asset on these financial aid applications, okay? The reason being, $10,000 in your name as the parent, that's not enough to move the needle in terms of financial aid eligibility, but $10,000 if it's in your kid's name, it is. It is not apples to apples. It's looked at with way more scrutiny. And again, basically the colleges are saying this money should come to us. So a mission critical point here. Okay. Now, just for clarification purposes, you're not reporting your retirement account balances. They are going to want to know, what did you contribute to these accounts? You contribute to a 401k, you need to put that amount. They consider it untaxed income. Do not put what your employer matches if your employer matches, but if you contribute to your retirement accounts, they want to know that information. You put that dollar amount just for the, just in a given year. So again, I don't want to gloss over the IRA, even if it's custodial. If it's any type of Roth, okay, it's an IRA, retirement account, don't include it. Doesn't matter if it's custodial, doesn't matter if it's the kids. It's a retirement account, we leave it off, okay? So I got a couple of questions coming through here on 529s, which I'm glad, because this is, again, one of the biggest mistakes that families will make. Intuition kind of tells you, if you have a 529, this must be the student's assets. It's for education. Their name shows up at the top. I assume this is their money. It's not. They are the beneficiaries. If you have a 529, it's mission critical that you report that as your asset, not as the student's. Number one, that's the correct way to report it. Number two, it's going to do you a huge favor in terms of how it impacts or really doesn't impact your EFC. Okay, so great question and very, very important here. And any custodial accounts, UTMAs, UGMAs, getting a few questions around that as well. Those are, in fact, the students' accounts, right? Those are student assets, okay? Unless they are 529 UTMA or UGMA. So if 529s are attached to that in any capacity, that's going to be their their asset. Okay. I got a few questions around home values and how to report the value of that, et cetera. Bear with me for just a second. Not used to doing these solo, guys. Got to catch my breath here. Okay, so how should we value our home? Now, a couple things to talk about here. And a lot of people see that for the first time and they're like, what the hell are you talking about, value our home? Believe it or not, a decent amount of these colleges, specifically the private colleges, they consider your home fair game, right? And that's a problem, especially we have an office in Cranford, right? I know I'm down there all the time. I know what the home values are in your neck of the woods. And it's for a lot of families, this is the biggest challenge. This is the biggest, or at least one of the biggest, assets that you have. But basically some of these colleges, I don't want to say all, and again, there's a variation. I'll pick on Boston College in my backyard here. They're going to say, if your home's worth 600 and you owe 200 on it, that's a $400,000 savings account, right? I'm exaggerating a little bit, but not a ton. That's the basic concept. So how we report the value of our home matters a lot. Okay. So easiest, and we do whole presentations on how to present home equity, so we're not going to be able to unpack it all tonight, but the easiest strategy that anybody can basically deploy is whatever you have to have a defendable answer here, right? Now, obviously the value of your home, that's a gray area. If I'm going to buy your home, I'm going to say there's a different value than you as the seller. Okay. So we understand this is a gray area. This is arbitrary. This is one of the games that we all play with these colleges when applying for financial aid. But the easiest way to do it is there's something called the IRS quick sale value rule, where basically if you sell your home, you don't get taxed on the whole thing. You only get taxed on 80% of it, because they know, number one, you're going to have to pay taxes. You're going to have to pay fees, et cetera, et cetera. So we can take that and reasonably defend that stance here. So we can say, if our home's value has a market value of $1 million, we can list it as 800,000. Okay, because this is how it would work with the IRS. And again, this is something that we can reasonably defend. That's the easiest strategies. There's others, and we don't keep them a secret. So kind of follow along with us here, but that's the easiest one that can help you on showing a lower value to these colleges as they're making an assessment themselves. Okay, yeah. So to clarify here, on the FAFSA, you are not going to include the balance of your retirement accounts. So if you have $400,000 in your 401k, you're not putting that at all. Okay. But in a separate question, they're going to ask you what you contribute to your 401k each year. You got to answer that. So if you contribute $5,000 to your 401k or whatever retirement plan that you participate in, you include that. Okay. So you include your contribution amount, but not the balance of those accounts. Okay. But you are not going to include contribution amounts made by your employer, right? Only made by you. So hopefully that's helpful. Okay. So from an income standpoint, we don't spend a lot of time talking about income, because it's one of these, it is what it is type of deal. But I do want to flag the fact that every college uses what's called the prior tax year, right? So for you class of 2023 families, they're looking at 21 returns to determine your eligibility for financial aid for your student's freshman year, right? So 2021 is the tax year. When you reapply for financial aid for a sophomore year, you got to reapply every year, guys. One of the annoying parts of this process, but they'll be looking at this current calendar year 22. So for you class 2024 families, they're looking at right now is what's called your base income year, your 2022 tax return. Okay. Now, I want to spend a few minutes here before we kind of go drill down a little bit on your particular situation, and we'll go look at some case studies with some actual schools to see how generous or not they are. I want to spend a few minutes talking about merit-based financial aid. And this applies to everybody, but specifically it's an area of focus if you're not going to be eligible for need-based financial aid or not much need-based financial aid, right? But you're still, need to get some discounts or would love to get some discounts. What are some of the ways that we can do that, right? The first thing is merit aid. Where can we find out where students are going to be eligible for merit-based scholarships, right? Where's my kid going to get some money just based on their credentials? Okay. Second thing I want to flag here is some of these colleges, and we did mention this at the top, to be considered for merit-based scholarships, you still need to complete the financial aid applications, even if you're not going to be eligible, right? A lot of families make the mistake of saying, hey, we're not going to be eligible for financial aid, so we're not going to complete the financial aid applications. But then you're also disqualifying yourself for merit-based scholarships. Not at every college, right? Again, it's an important point. It depends on the college. Now, I'll pick on one in your backyard, relatively speaking, NYU, right? Pretty popular school. I'm sure some of your kids are applying there. But for NYU, to even be considered for their merit aid, you have to complete the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So as a general rule of thumb, we recommend that everybody at least complete those forms so you can at least check the box and make sure that your kind of bases are covered there, even if you're not applying for financial aid. And I know that seems a little bit wonky, but you cannot apply for financial aid, but still complete the applications to make sure that you're going to be considered for merit-based scholarships for the colleges that require those, right? Others, like I mentioned at the top, all you need to do is apply to the colleges themselves. But you want to make sure that again, for the colleges that you guys are targeting, you've got that sorted out. Okay. Now, I'll show you in a sec. We'll jump into our platform and kind of see how we can figure out, get an idea of where you're likely to be eligible for merit-based scholarships in a second year. And again, like I promised, I would talk about every school's different, right? And let me kind of skip down to this next point here, and I think it's worth reemphasizing. Not everybody gives scholarships, okay? And there's about 100 colleges now where scholarships don't exist. There's not one kid on one Ivy League campus that is there on a scholarship, right? Even schools like Franklin and Marshall now, as Martian, scholarships don't exist there, right? If somebody's getting a discount there, they're getting need-based financial aid, right? Doesn't matter what type of athlete they are. Doesn't mean, doesn't matter how gifted they are as a student, musician, whatever. The takeaway here is as you're finalizing your list of colleges for your class 2023 families, if the price point is important here, and you're targeting all really competitive schools, and you don't think you're going to be eligible for much financial aid, probably at least want to hedge your bets to make sure you're applying to a couple schools where merit-based scholarships at least exist, right? It's really, really important. And then the other thing here, and again, this is important for everybody, but I think especially for families that are not going to be eligible for need-based aid, we want to apply to competing schools, right? They're nonprofit institutions, but they're a lot of them multi-billion-dollar corporations. Okay. And that's not a bad thing, but we just want to embrace that mindset as a consumer, right? And know that that's a part of this process. It's an important piece of the puzzle. Okay. So I went to Stonehill College, right? And it's here in the Northeast, relatively popular. And I'll have a lot of families that'll say, hey, we're all in on Stonehill. That's where we want to go. We're going to go, we're only applying there and that's it. I will borderline make them apply to Bentley, right? And it's not, Bentley was our rival. I got no love for Bentley, but I have no hate for them either. It's an awesome school, but I will make them apply to Bentley, not because I want them to even consider going there, because I want to take that offer for Bentley. I want to use it to get more money out of Stonehill, and vice versa. If you're in love with Bentley and you hated Stonehill, I'll still firmly recommend that you apply to Stonehill just so we can use that as leverage when we go back to Bentley, right? And that's especially important if you're not going to be able to have a crutch or any ammunition when it comes to need-based financial aid. So we want to take this competitive environment and use it to our advantage. I'm going to stop sharing for just a hot second here, guys, while I pull up another screen, if I may. And this screen, this is for those of you that have already set up your accounts on MyCAP here, right? You recognize this page. This is just the home dashboard here, right? And there's a couple of things that I want to do to just use this as kind of a case study and education standpoint. And then I want it to be a little bit interactive here too. I'm going to ask you to throw a few schools in here so we can take a closer look. So, but I'm at my office in Salem, Mass here. It's Halloween capital of the world, by the way. Even though I live 2 miles down the street, just over the bridge in Beverly, Mass, sometimes the commute takes about half hour this time of year, but that wouldn't stop me from helping you guys out tonight. But so this is a family of four from my town here, right, in Beverly. And I always think it's a great case study because there's a bunch like these, but I like to use an actual one because I think that kind of makes the point even a little bit more. So it's a family of four, average income, average savings. They have a senior class 2023 and a class 2025 student. And these are some of the colleges that they are targeting currently. Okay. And it's also a really smart kid. Okay. So as you can see here, and for those of you that have created your accounts already, you'll see one of the first things that we are that's kind of staring you in the face here are your family's EFCs. right? And to further complicate things, and we don't lead with this because I think it's helpful to kind of build up to it, so as not to further confuse folks. But there's 3 different EFCs, right? And any given college can use any one of these 3 EFCs as kind of their basic business model. And then we have some variation within each of these buckets. Now, most schools use the federal EFC, right? So our UC Santa Barbara's, our UMass Amherst, right? They use the federal EFC. Most state schools, okay. A lot of the more popular private institutions use what's called the institutional EFC. So our NYUs of the world, for example, okay, use this formula. And then there's a smaller group of schools, albeit very popular group of schools, that use what's called the consensus EFC. So these are the Ivy Leagues, these are the Swarthmores, the Amherst, the Middleburys, Williams of the world that use this consensus methodology. Now, the reason why we see this wild discrepancy between the federal EFC and the institutional EFC, these schools, to varying degrees, consider home equity fair game. Okay, in this particular family, they don't have a ton of savings, but they have a very meaningful amount of home equity. So that's why schools that use this formula think that they should be able to pay way more on an annual basis than schools that use this formula or this formula. So it's helpful to know beforehand. I'm really telling you more than you need to know, but hopefully some of that context is helpful as you guys are trying to figure out, well, how much are schools actually going to cost me? And that's why I'd say this is your source of truth here, guys, right? Because even the net price calculators at the colleges themselves, and they will tell you they stink. They're misleading. They have to have something up there. It's a federal rule, but a lot of them are not very transparent and don't set a good expectation of how it actually plays out. Okay. But that's kind of the why. Now, what I want you focused on is the fact that, again, in many, many cases, the sticker prices or the cost of attendance of colleges, it's irrelevant. I want you to focus on how much are you going to actually pay at these colleges, right? And look at Amherst College, $85,000 school. It's going to cost this family less to go to the $85,000 school than it is to go to the in-state. Again, this is a Mass family, than it is to go to the in-state state school at UMass Amherst. So it's really, this is again, and this isn't a wacky, situation that really applies to families. This is pretty much relatively par for the course. And again, the big takeaway being, don't get fooled by the sticker prices. I want you focused on the net cost. What are these schools actually going to cost you? So pop them in here and see what you got. So I want to, if you could, throw in the chat, throw out a couple colleges. Let's actually look at a couple colleges, and I'm going to drill down another layer to show you how generous or not they actually are. So Seton Hall is a good one, right? Let's look at Seton Hall, and I bet we're going to be eligible for some need-based and some merit-based aid. So we're not going to pay full sticker price at Seton Hall, but it's still going to be a hefty cost at $50K. Now let's look at why, right? Now, if I click on Seton Hall or any school, there's a few things that I think are going to be helpful. Number one, they're going to tell me what my sticker price, what my net cost is going to be, and then how we got there. So Seton Hall, they're not great with need-based financial aid, but they're pretty generous when it comes to merit-based scholarships, right? So this kid's going to get, in all likelihood, a $22,000 scholarship. And we can see, again, this is more than you need to know, but I think it's helpful to have everything in one place. You can see why. Why is this kid getting a scholarship? Well, here's the average GPA, here's the average test scores, and you can get a good idea of where your kid stacks up. And usually it helps explain the why if we're projecting a scholarship. And same with financial aid. What formula do they use? How generous are they in terms of meeting need-based financial aid or not? That's always helpful. So let me look at some other, and I appreciate it. We're getting a bunch of great things here. So let's look at Wake Forest. Okay, Wake Forest is a school that, very expensive school, but extremely generous with need-based financial aid, right? So we're seeing the fact that, it's an $84,000 school, but we're going to pay 26 to go there. Why? Well, this is the methodology that the school uses, and it's very generous with need-based financial aid. Again, more than you need to know. I just want you focused on how much are you going to have to pay. Let's look at one more before we have to move on here. And again, you guys have all access to this yourselves. You can do it at home until your hearts are content. Rhode Island School of Design, so RISD, right? Not great with need-based financial aid, but they can be really good with merit-based scholarships in my experience. So, again, this is a school that we can expect to see a decent discount at here, but you get the idea, right? And again, kind of leverage this platform yourselves. And one more thing while I'm on here, and then I got to make sure I get to my other important talking points tonight, but this affordability thing, we're trying to do two things here. Like, number one, we want to help you kind of gut check, what are schools actually going to cost you? Actually, I'll show you two more things here. But then we also want to help you figure out, is this a good investment for our family, right? Can we afford this? So this part of the platform is we're trying to show you, okay, what is this school going to cost over the course of 4 years? Okay. What can you come up with as a family? We ask you, we have this little exercise that helps you figure out we call our college pre-approval, right? So between resources you have on hand, maybe some monthly cash flow, is grandparents going to kick anything in? What can we come up with each year before we have to borrow, right? So that's our 4-year college pre-approval versus our 4-year net cost. And what's the difference that somebody has to borrow? Okay. And we're not anti-borrowing. We're just anti-borrowing too much. So we want to help you understand, your kids more importantly understand, because we found out, like, teenagers, they don't know what it means to borrow 60,000 versus 170,000 versus 25,000. It's not their fault. Their frontal cortex isn't developed enough, right, to be able to really comprehend this. But what we found that speaks to them is we can break it down into monthly amounts. Listen, if you take this loan, this is what your first monthly payment is going to be versus your take-home pay at that particular school based on your major, if you know it, right? Now, obviously, it's an inexact science. That's a moving target. But we're trying to create a basic framework to say, like, does the return on investment make sense here? Does this seem like a right path? It doesn't mean you don't apply to schools that we're throwing up the caution flag for. We just want you to take a closer look, right? Let's be extra careful that this is going to be a good fit for our family, right? And at a minimum, hedge our bets. So along those lines, the other thing that we have here, so this advanced school search, you have Naviance or Score through the school, but this one helps you, I think, come up with some good financial ideas, right? So if let's say that your kid wants to be relatively close to home, they prefer small schools, and you're thinking about majoring in whatever you're thinking about majoring, if right, you can sort that and just say, hey, I'm not going to get financial aid, but I want to know who's going to give me the most in scholarship dollars, right? You can sort that way. Or I just want to know who's going to give me the most in financial aid if you are eligible for financial aid. So it's another good way, again, to leverage a platform to make sure that, if nothing else, you're hedging your bets. I mean, another thing that we say all the time internally is there's so many moving parts in this process, right? And nobody knows exactly how this thing is going to play out and where you're going to get accepted and how majors are going to change and all that. But we want to do what we can do. Number one, to stack the deck in our favor, and number two, just hedge our bets, right? Make sure that we have other options here. So that's a couple ways that I'd encourage you to do it through the platform here. Okay. And then again, just some more points of emphasis around merit-based aid, which I think I hammered those home. And again, you're going to get the follow-up slide as well. So how do we apply for financial aid? And we're going to, as a matter of fact, we do a presentation over the next couple of weeks that goes line by line through these financial aid applications. It's electric. entertainment. It's horrible, right? But I think it is valuable. So I'll make sure that we I will send that link to Lisa for next week, because we're doing one of these line by line presentations. And if you guys want to attend that, she can share it with you all. The other thing, I'm getting flagged for battery here, and I don't want to go asleep. So bear with me just 1 second, guys, while we shift venues. Sorry about that, but I'll be 1 second here. Give me a second. Sorry, everybody. Okay, so I think we got our power source here now. Okay, so going back to my theme here, every school is different, right? And these colleges are notoriously bad with communication. They're not going to tell you, hey, we see that you're applying to Syracuse. Here's our due dates. And in addition to the FAFSA, we require the CSS profile, and we have our own institutional form. The onus is on you, right? The onus is on you as the parent or parents and the student to figure out what exactly, for the colleges that we're applying to, what do they need? When do they need it? How do they need it? So we have to be proactive, right? So as that list of colleges come to fruition, you need to reach out to them and make sure that you are crystal clear on exactly what they need. And equally as importantly, what are the due dates? Do not miss due dates, guys. Do not give these folks any reason to give you less money, because generally speaking, if you give them less money, if you miss a due date, they're going to give you less money. Okay. Now, question here: if we're applying early decision or early action and the due date is 11/1, do we need to complete the FAFSA and CSS profile by then as well? It depends on the college. Some colleges have the same due date for the financial aid applications as they do the admissions applications, right? Others don't. So that's a perfect example where it depends on the school. And generally speaking, financial aid and admissions are really two different offices, right? So the admissions office has their own requirements, deadlines, et cetera. The financial aid office, same. They have their own requirements, deadlines, et cetera. And you have to have a line of communication with both. And again, just make sure you're satisfying each of those. But they don't, believe it or not, work in unison with one another. Okay. Sometimes the due dates are the same, sometimes they're not. Okay. Now we have to bank on the fact that every single college is going to require the FAFSA. Again, you're going to get the slides as the follow-up, and as a matter of fact, I'm going to show you at the end tonight your very own recently released financial aid survivor kit that I think will really help you guys complete these forms. But this is the website. Before you complete it, you got to create an FSA ID. Each student needs one, and one custodial parent needs one. Okay. And I'll talk about the custodial parent in a second there, because I know it's a weird way to say it, but it'll make sense. It'll make sense in a second. And again, we're looking at 2021 tax returns. Now, this is something that, again, you guys are going to get this as a follow-up, but a couple things I want to flag. Hopefully I beat you over the head hard enough to say, do not include retirement accounts on the FAFSA. Do not include anything to do with your home equity on the FAFSA. I emphasized home equity, but it only goes on the CSS profile. If you're a business owner and you have less than 100 employees, do not report any assets on the FAFSA. Okay. And again, another big one I have on here is just to make sure that you remember to only report 529 assets as a parental asset, not as a student asset. Okay. Now, CSS profile, right? That's like the FAFSA on steroids. Okay, that's kind of the most condensed way that I would describe this particular financial aid application. It's not required by every school. About 200 schools require it, and it happens to be a lot of these more name brand competitive schools in addition to the FAFSA. My good buddy and colleague, Lisa knows him too, Bill Rabbit, Uncle Bill, as we call him as we call him internally here, his kind of famous line is that you can get through the FAFSA with a glass of wine or two. CSS profile is going to require at least the whole bottle. And that's, I think pretty fair advice in terms of setting expectations. This is the one that gives people fits. I think the FAFSA has done a good job of being pretty user-friendly, pretty manageable to complete. CSS profile is a pain in the ass. There's no way to sugarcoat it. Now, the what I'll flag here is divorced and separated families. And excuse me, let me make sure I'm doing okay on time here, guys. I know, okay, we're doing okay. So the divorced and separated families. Now, for colleges that only require the FAFSA, and this goes for the FAFSA just as a whole, okay? The only information that goes on there is that of the custodial parent or parents. So whomever the student lives with more, that's whose information goes on the FAFSA. Okay, so if the student lives with, and it doesn't matter if you were divorced or separated 6 months ago, okay? If there's two different addresses and you file taxes separately, right, it's only the custodial parent or parents that goes on the FAFSA. So and even if you're in the same apartment complex, if there's a different address, only the custodial parent's information goes on the FAFSA. Okay. Now, if that parent is remarried, well, now that step parent is technically a custodial parent. So it would be that combined household, right? The step parent and the biological parent, custodial parent, that goes on the FAFSA. It's still as if the non-custodial, even though it's biological parent, doesn't exist. Okay. So only the custodial household information goes on the FAFSA. Non-custodial parent doesn't exist, okay, so to speak. For colleges that require the CSS profile, most of them, not all, most of them are going to require the custodial household to complete the FAFSA, to complete the CSS profile, and then the non-custodial household is going to be required to complete a separate, same form, but you won't see one another's, a separate, their own CSS profile as well. Okay, so colleges that require the CSS profile, by and large, they're going to want one of those applications from the custodial household and one from the non-custodial household. So hopefully that's relatively clear. And here's kind of the 7 big mistakes that most folks put on the CSS profile, but you guys will have the ability to take a look at that yourselves. I want to quickly flag some big changes that are coming down the pike, specifically on the FAFSA, but they're going to have sweeping changes on kind of higher ed as a whole. There's some great ones, right? All families are going to be, all families that don't have a lot of resources are going to get more help, right? So I think everybody can get behind that. Families that don't have much or any resources, they're going to get more help. The FAFSA itself is going to be easier. So this is going to especially help families that are first generation families or English as a second language families. That's going to help, again, families that need the most help. So everybody's psyched about the good changes that are coming to the FAFSA. There's a couple bad ones, okay? The one that I'll flag that kind of is the biggest deal to me personally, and let me, again, I know I'm not sharing my screen for a second here. Let me just go grab something quickly because I want to grab a particular link. But if you're looking at, oh, you're actually not looking at my screen, but you will be in a second here. But right now, if you have more than one kid in college, the calculation accounts for that. So you get a break. If you have twins or if you have a sophomore and a senior that are in college at once, you get a break to account for that. Sibling discount, as you would expect, because you're one family with one resources, but now the resources are deployed between 2 kids. That's going away. Okay. And effectively, without boring you with the details, if you have more than one kid in college at one time, for most families that this applies to, the cost of college is going to double. That's starting next year. So I put the link in the chat, but we started a petition. We've been working our butts off to try to stop this rule from going through. We've been getting in front of decision makers on Capitol Hill. But the short feedback is until you have 100,000 signatures, we're not going to be able to move the needle. We're up to about almost 65,000, and we've done it all through this kind of grassroots, whoever we're in front of. So please sign, please share the petition, especially if it impacts you. If it doesn't impact you, I promise it's going to impact some people that you know. So I'll keep my soapbox thing pretty short, but if you would be open to it, again, I put it in the chat, and it's kind of near and dear to me personally, and it should be to you, whether it impacts you directly or one of your buddies. So I'm grateful if you're willing to sign and or share that. I'm not going to spend time on this because this is something that we're going to do starting middle of December when the first early decision packages come back, and then we'll focus in March a lot on it. But this is basically, once we get an offer back from colleges, how do we go back and get more money? We don't use the word negotiate, even though it's exactly what we're doing, but there's kind of a method to the madness in terms of how we go back to these schools and get more money than whatever the initial offer might have looked like. Okay. And I know there's a couple questions here. So in terms of where to, and I'll make sure I get to these other questions. There's a few ways to best, and I know I'm not sharing again here, guys, a few ways to best leverage us from here. One of them, grabbing another link from you now, or for you rather, every other week, we have what we call office hours, and it's myself and or one of my colleagues that basically just post up and answer questions that you all have, right? And I am popping this link in the chat. Okay, so I'd register for that. It's a recurring webinar. We do them every other week right now, but we're going to do them once a week for the rest of this busy season, maybe even more than that. If you haven't already, I'd register for that. We'll give you reminders too, because again, as questions come up, you can just pop in and say, hey, I have another property. How should I report this on the FAFSA? We have a grandparent living with us. How should we treat that? Whatever it is, right? That's how you can access us us on a relatively consistent basis. Here's what else. I'm kind of proud of this. This is I had a whole team to help me complete it, but it was one of my ideas that I had. But this is our financial aid survivor kit. Okay. And I just popped it in the group chat here, but I'd recommend go and check this out. But especially for your class 2024, as you're going to navigate these financial aid forms, this is what I think can help you. If you're a DIYer, go ahead and do it on your own, right? We have line by line instructions through it. We have our little psychological mindset videos type of deal, but hopefully a lot to help you make sure that you complete these forms the right way. For those of you, and let me say explicitly, right, to give you, before I go into our mini pitch of sorts, which I hope it's not too much of a pitch. We don't have any type of relationship with Cranford. They don't endorse us, anything like that. I think they think we know what we're talking about when it comes to this stuff. So the idea is that we come in and educate you guys, a couple ideas a couple times a year on how this whole thing works, and just provide hopefully a lot of resources as you guys are navigating this. But everybody's going to go to that link, and you'll see kind of our what you can do to help support you in completing those forms. For some folks, they want to say, yeah, I'll complete these forms, but I want to have somebody gut check it for me, right? I want to review them with an expert. I want to ask some particular questions that were really tripping me up. So we have this, we have this package here. We charge $299. Oh, and I got to put this in the chat. So our kind of platform is MyCAP, mycap.collegeaidpro.com. Sorry, and this will be on your stuff that we send you tomorrow too. And then we made you a special Cranford coupon code. So if you want, if you put in this, you go to our mycap.collegeaidpro.com. If you choose our valedictorian option. It's $300, but you put in the coupon code, you get like $50 off. But anyways, that'll allow you to book an hour with one of us where we can review these forms with you, answer any and all questions you have. You do whatever you want with the hour, but you can get kind of a gut check to make sure that you are feel good about what these forms look like before you send them off. I think for most folks, it's a pretty good investment. For a percentage of the population, you just don't want to do these forms, period. You want us to do them for you. And, we have this, what we call wake me up when it's over package. And, you can, again, go look at this link yourself, see if it's something you're interested in. And we can take care of this deal on your behalf. But anyways, if you decide to do anything beyond the free version, you put your coupon code in there, saves you a couple bucks. And we can guide you in whatever way you want if it's something that you think you need beyond navigating this thing on your own. But I hope that was helpful. I always struggle with how much information is too much. System overload, but I still want to get to everything and not be too fast. So hopefully you learned something. Again, we're going to send out the slide deck tomorrow, and the recording itself tomorrow. And again, hopefully you'll just continue to follow along with us. Sign up for those office hours if you didn't already, because we try to be as accessible as we can be as you guys navigate this process. So I think I got to all the questions here. I'm just looking through and it looks like I got all of them. Yeah, so okay, everybody. Well, great questions, great interaction as always from my Cranford folks, and we appreciate you, and we're pulling for you as you navigate this tricky process. Thanks, everybody.